He's looking at Shadow. He's like, let me spit a coin at you, slide it under the trunk. I have a trunk. That car has a trunk. The car is on the ice. Allison is missing. Trunks lock. Trunks are where you put things you don't want found. I'm an elephant. Go look over there.
Because I don't forget.
Welcome to Shat on TV American Gods, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the Starz series American Gods. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Ash Lafley.
Hi, y'all.
And this is our deep dive edition where we look back and offer our thoughts and research, plus the top listener email for the week. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, at shatthemovies.com, and our Twitch stream at shatontv.com/Twitch. In this edition of Shat on TV, we're going to be talking about American Gods, Season 3, Episode 7, Fire and Ice. Ash, what'd you think of the episode?
I thought it was another really good episode. I thought there was a lot in it. I did miss like the traditional American Gods cold open that they've kind of returned to. I missed that a little bit. But what I liked about this episode is the only criticism I think that some people have had this season that I think is a little valid is that the show has found its footing, but like as far as like its purpose, I don't know if it's found that. Like what is driving the characters this season other than just this war between the new and the old gods that we know about. And finally, we got a genuine purpose, a genuine plot device of kind of where we're going to go with our characters from here with Bilquis's mission of sorts that she's given, which we're going to talk about in depth tonight. So with that plot to move us forward, I think we find ourselves in a really great place as of episode 7. And they have continued with just some really beautiful scenes that they're constructing this season. This show's kind of become eye candy, right? Like each episode, I wait for that moment that's going to be just really beautiful. And this one had a couple. We're going to talk about the party, but one that we won't talk about is even just the way the ink was picked up in that fountain pen, like the way they're shooting different things this season. They've really taken their time. It's really intentional. And I'm pretty excited to see where we continue to go from here.
Gross, hairy butcher in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Very sexy. Yeah, American Gods, dare I say, is operating with a game plan. I think we've been conditioned to accept TV that isn't as smart as the viewers in a lot of cases. In this case, watching this episode, they were doing things that I never would have thought of. Professional writers doing a better job than I can. I love it. Things done earlier in the season, clues left behind, characters introduced, they were all coming home to roost. I thought it was wonderfully orchestrated and really stylish. Like you were saying, the way it was shot, the way it sounded. And this is just episode 7. There are still 3 episodes left. And my gut tells me the season finale is going to blow our minds.
Well, and how funny to be where we are now, because I remember you and I having a conversation, one of like the grown conversations. Okay, American Gods is coming back. And we're like, what the fuck are they going to talk about for 10 episodes? Like, how are they going to do that? And now here I am after episode 7 going, wow, like they could do a 13 episode season maybe, because they seem to still have so much ground to cover, which is exciting thinking about where the show is going to go, not just the rest of season 3, but, you know, with the upcoming season 4 and season 5 as well.
So let's dig into what we saw in this episode, episode 7. We had some pretty big reveals, some references to the novel, and finally found out what they would do without Marilyn Manson.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. I think what's interesting too is that upon watch, I thought one thing was a giant reveal and you thought another was a giant reveal. So we're going to cover both tonight. Let's start with mine, right? So for me, the big quote unquote reveal was what I alluded to when I was talking about the episode, which is what happens with Bilquis. So we've got our fully freed goddess. She's totally come into her own and she's got to figure out, okay, now that I am myself again, what am I gonna do, right? Like, what is my purpose? And so she seeks her shells and she goes through and she sees a series of visions that leads her to Chicago, to this beautiful party that's happening. It is a party I would go to any day. I don't know about you, it made me really jealous for like pre-COVID times where we could all dance with like our bodies close to another person. It looked like a really good time. And so she ends up here. And she ends up meeting an older woman. Her name is Eugenia. And what I love about this is Eugenia is another puzzle piece that's fallen into place for us this season about Shadow Moon's history and about his life. So we find out that Eugenia, she is the individual that helped Shadow and his mother originally get away from Odin. She's the one that helped them escape. And I think that this gives us a little bit of context to continue to move that story forward, because hopefully now that we've met Eugenia, we're going to get even more backstory as to what actually happened there. And so Eugenia, she apparently was the midwife to Shadow Moon. She helped bring him literally into this world. And what's really great about her, the connection with Bilquis, is that Eugenia has always worshipped and kind of walked among the Orishas. So we get them again in this episode. They're here at this party. And so Bilquis comes in and she knows that she needs to encounter Eugenia. And at first, Eugenia kind of, rebuffs her attention. She doesn't want anything to do with her. And I think Bilquis is rightly really confused here, because I mentioned the visions. If you guys weren't paying attention, there were a lot of different snapshots. So we're going to talk about what was in them. But she sees the baby Shadow. She sees Eugenia. She knows that she's important in some way. But Eugenia doesn't really seem to want her around until Bilquis reveals herself through this dance sequence. So she and the Orishas start to dance this beautiful sequence in these gorgeous, like multicolored outfits with like these capes, and it's absolutely beautiful. And Eugenia recognizes who she is. She has this realization of, oh, I didn't know who you were. And Bilquis says, why I had to remind you. And so Eugenia comes out and they have this lovely dance sequence. And so Eugenia at this point sits down with Bilquis and she says to her, Bilquis, you're the only one who can find the other. And so we've not been privy to this information before either. And so our big question here is, well, what is the other? And unfortunately, well, we don't know at this point. But the other apparently is incredibly necessary. It's an other half to Shadow. So Shadow's going to make up 50% of the equation. Whomever this other is going to be the other 50%. And we also find out the stakes, that the we that the Orishas refer to, they cannot be whole. And the people that encompass that we will cease to exist without the finding of this other and the meshing of those two 50%. And so I think that obviously gives us our intentionality moving forward of what Bilquis is going to do and why she's going to continue to be with Shadow throughout this season. And the only other thing I'll mention here is with regard to these visions, we don't get much in the others. If you saw something we're not seeing, please write in, please give us a call, because the other things that we kind of picked up is that Laura Moon is seen in a couple of the snapshots that Bilquis sees with Odin's spear, which we know that she gets and she negotiates this episode. So we know that's coming. I don't think Laura is the other. I think that would be way too on the nose. But the question is, have we encountered the other? I don't know. And I'm pretty excited that we've got 3 more episodes to maybe figure that out.
Ash, watching this scene, all I could think was, this is the most Ash Lafley scene in any TV show, because you've got the Buffy element, which is like, we need to find the other so we can all come together and stop this big bad evil. And there's a dance sequence. Like, this is Ash 100%. Mm-hmm. And guys, if this dance scene made you uncomfortable or seemed pointless, and you're like, come on, let's get on with the show, this is the show. And I think a lot of us have been conditioned by the way TV is to think that that's the way TV should be, or is the only way it can be. And it made me think of video games, right? In video games, you always got to kill stuff, whether it's Mario Brothers or Duke Nukem or Counter-Strike, you're always killing stuff. And some people do dare make video games where you're not killing stuff, where you're just doing other things, going through a story, solving a puzzle. I was personally smiling from ear to ear watching this scene because it was just something different, but it made sense. And there was a power being demonstrated on screen that wasn't violence. It was pretty cool.
Well, and I think it continues a trend that American Gods has set this season, which is providing character development without dialogue. And that is something I think a lot of people aren't used to. They're not used to the fact that we learned so much about Bilquis 2 weeks ago when she breaks free, just through that dance sequence that she has with the Orishas. We learned this week even more about her and her connection to the Orishas. And we learned everything we need to know about Eugenia in just that dance sequence. And that's a pretty effective storytelling tool.
And one thing I picked up in the vision that you mentioned, Ash, was the number 1619, which was the number outside the building. The significance of 1619 is that's when Angolans who were kidnapped by the Portuguese arrived in Virginia. So these were the first enslaved Africans who arrived and were purchased by colonists, which began the 250-year history of Africans being used as slaves in America. So that 1619 was very intentionally placed there. Now, for my reveal, Ash, what I saw as the big reveal in this episode harkens back to the cover of American Gods, the novel. If you look at the cover of, I think, the 10th anniversary edition, it says the war had begun and nobody saw it. And I think that's what we're meant to see here in this episode. The episode opens with this body falling from the sky. Cordelia freaks out, and this creature, which is later revealed to be Johann, investigates the body before scurrying away. We get another vision, and this time the vision is this flyer for a memorial vigil for Blood Death. That was Johann's band. And on the flyer, it says, special guest, YouTube sensation, Mr. Wednesday. Kind of calling back to earlier when Mr. World was losing his shit because Mr. Wednesday was becoming very popular with the kids. Apparently, the kids are still watching YouTube. And it was hosted by high pagan priest Olafsson. Now, I started to believe this was the mystery of the episode. Where did this body come from? What's happening in this episode? Some sort of a new evil is being presented. But American Gods surprised me by revealing this is not a new mystery. This is actually one trap in a series of chess moves by Tyr. One-handed, affable dentist Tyr, right? In this case, it was a move meant to lure Johann to his demise.
Well, we should have known. I mean, dentists, no offense to any of our listeners that are, I mean, they're scary motherfuckers, right? Like, and he's collecting teeth. He's really upset about everything that's going on with Demeter. And I think that probably what happened to Demeter, this has to be like the straw that breaks the camel's back for him, right? Because now he's lost Demeter twice and for real this time as a result of Mr. Wednesday. And I don't know. I think you're right. I think it's so obvious. But Dennis O'Hare has done such a good job of playing such a kind-hearted, even in the flashbacks, the young Tyr is so kind-hearted and so warm. He's never seemed like a war god. But I think that's what we've forgotten is that he's also a war god. And that's what we're seeing here.
And Ash, from our Westworld days, we know that nobody likes a host who brags about being right. So I'm going to do it for you. The werewolf thing?
Yes, I know. I was really excited to see that, although I did think it looked kind of like shit. But I was excited to see the werewolf reference, and he got to call him Fire Bear one more time, which is pretty great. A couple people reached out to me through DMs on Twitter that were a little confused by the montage at the end that is set to Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker. And first of all, absolutely amazing song. And I think that it was really intentional to use this song. And with American Gods, we usually get the music over the credits, but they use it at the end, I think in a way that's supposed to kind of answer the question of whether or not Tyr is actually bad. Because some people actually, a couple of critics even, were very confused of, is he doing Mr. Wednesday's bidding? Or is he really bad? And if you look at the lyrics to this song, and it's actually a really long song, the first verse says, if you're the dealer, I'm out of the game. If you're the healer, it means I'm broken and lame. If thine is the glory, then mine must be the shame. And I think that those types of lyrics of that like comparison, talking about in that super religious way about if thine is the glory, right? Like that's such a religious phrase, especially in modern day Christianity, and that mine is the shame. We know that Tyr feels shame about what has happened. We know he feels an immense amount of regret. And in verse 3, there's another line here that says, there's a lover in the story, but the story's still the same. There's a lullaby for suffering and a paradox to blame. And so I think that when you start to unpack that, it almost sounds like Tyr's written these lyrics about what has happened between he and Mr. Wednesday, because it is a paradox that Demeter would fall in love with the person that was going to hurt her and then choose to leave because she doesn't want to be hurt again. Like Tyr is never good enough. So he truly is this lullaby for suffering in a way that while he didn't lose a child with her, he still suffered immensely. And I think that song over the montage, I think there's no question here that Tyr is our big bad, to use a Buffy term, since you already brought Buffy into this recording. That is our big bad this season. And Dennis O'Hare, I love him. I think he's incredible. And I'm excited to see him go from just like nice little button up dentist to actual war god Tyr to match what Ian McShane's showing us with Mr. Wednesday.
And at the beginning of this recording, I talked about how this episode was just dripping with style. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, Ash. This Cohen song was the perfect choice. And as it takes us through the characters, American God starts piecing it all together for us. There's the full view of the chessboard. Tyr has Shadow. He's orchestrated it in just that way. The words that Shadow said to his father come back to haunt him. Shadow says to Mr. Wednesday, if you need me, I mean really need me, call for me. And when Tyr shows up, Shadow's going because he thinks that's the call he's answering. Laura is hunting down Wednesday. Wednesday doesn't know that. Wednesday is looking for Tyr now because of the note that he left behind. We get a flash of Hinzelman and how her character has taken on this dark tone. Cordelia now has become a real worshiper. What is a worshiper other than a person who wants to be part of that bigger thing the gods are participating in? She's become a worshiper to an arrogant god just when that god is learning to care about people.
And I think what's interesting is Cordelia is the first real worshiper we've seen, right? She's the first convert that we've actually seen on screen. And I think that is also a reveal. I know it's not as big as our reveals of Tyr and Bilquis, but think about that. They've been very intentional to only show us previous and like current worshipers and then the gods themselves. The fact that we see her literally the conversion to the religion of Mr. Wednesday, not just as a job, but choosing to follow him. I think that also has to be marked as some sort of turning point for us.
And one of the greatest Trent Reznor 9 Inch Nail videos moments of this episode is then when they show that seal grabbing the little penguin and taking it underwater as a callback to Mr. World's office. And we realize that that seal is Tyr. The hunt is on and that nobody saw him coming. It all just wraps it up perfectly. The only thing I couldn't figure out, Ash, is why Marguerite was in that entire montage, because all she did was get laid.
I don't know. She looks good.
She looks real good. And speaking of Marguerite getting laid, this romance that was on display between Shadow and Marguerite was so much better than the romance we had between Shadow and Laura. And I think that's intentional. The sparks really start to fly in earnest when they're out ice skating right next to the clunker. Wonderful backdrop. I love that there's just all these kids and people having fun on this sunny day out there on the ice. And the clunker is just, It's right there. Yep. Just ominously hanging out.
Makes total sense.
Yeah. And nobody's like, well, it seems weird that this thing is going to drop in the ice at some point. We're all skating around it. But there's this clever bit of writing where Marguerite, in holding his hands while ice skating, says, how about we try letting go? And if you weren't looking at the screen, you would think they might be talking about something else. And what does Shadow say? I'm not sure I'm ready. I mean, this is like real, as you said, Ash, on the nose writing, kind of displaying where they are in their relationship, just on the precipice of letting go of that past thing. Laura was just there in the previous episode, and now Shadow has to let go to move on.
I think that for him, it's not just about letting go of Laura. I think it's also letting go of Shadow Moon, because I think he also, at his core, he wants to be Mike. He wants to be a normal, quote unquote, person that has a life where he can love someone, and just, he's never had that opportunity before. Like, he wants to be who he is to Marguerite. And so that's the other part, is he's not sure he's ready to let go of who he was, because he can't truly become Mike and become what he'd like to be until he lets go of all that baggage with his dad and, seeing shit in ice. He can't let go, until he lets go of that, he can't be Mike at all, if ever.
And if you guys haven't figured it out yet, I don't want to spoil it. So just fast forward about 5 seconds. But the show is trying really hard to tell us Allison is in that car.
Yes.
Like real hard. Like fucking Ganesha shows up under the ice. The elephant-headed Hindu god who's supposed to remove obstacles. He's looking at Shadow. He's like, let me spit a coin at you, slide it under the trunk. I have a trunk. That car has a trunk. The car is on the ice. Allison is missing. Trunks lock. Trunks are where you put things you don't want found. I'm an elephant. Go look over there.
Because I don't forget.
Shadow's like, I need to go make snow in the hot tub.
I mean, they should have just done like some weird like arrow, like Allison, Allison, Allison. Because I mean, that's how obvious it was. The only thing that would have been better is if he had had a vision of like Anne Marie driving the car, to let us know that she really was involved somehow. So
I'm just imagining like a Wes Anderson freeze frame with the arrow. That's
no,
like,
slow motion.
Allison.
No, it wouldn't be that. It would be like all of his movies in slow motion. Like it would have been some slow motion reveal. It would have been great.
But we did get to see Ricky Whittle's butt, and we got to see Marguerite's boobs. So, hey, it's a win.
It was a win, although let's get some consensus here. Snow sex looks awful and cold as fuck. It looked terrible. It looked gross. I thought it was unnecessary. I wish it would have just been the hot tub sex scene rather than like the weird snow angel sex scene, right?
I mean, be careful what you wish for here, because I liked the snow in that it gave us a season 1 callback to where Shadow discovered he could, make snow at will. But let's be grateful that this wasn't full-blown Tequila Sunrise sex, because we at Shat the Movies have seen some things.
Yeah, if you have not yet subscribed to Shat the Movies, I would encourage you to go and maybe start with our Tequila Sunrise episode where we talk about the Leviathan that is Mel Gibson's dick in the Tequila Sunrise sex scene, worst hot tub sex scene, or maybe possibly the best hot tub sex scene we've ever seen. But I don't know. I was glad though that Shadow finally. I'm getting kind of tired of the sexual tension, right? I was glad that finally they hooked up. We can put it into the will they, won't they, and then just kind of see. And it was sweet when they cut back to her in his apartment, and she's like got that little smile, like, and she's really happy. I thought that was nice, and in a very short time for a secondary character, I really like Marguerite, and I'm hoping they don't do something to her like Mr. Wednesday does something to her by the end of the season.
I just feel so bad for Shadow when anytime anything good happens, like my apartment's finally warm and I'm going to sleep. Uh-oh, nightmare. It's like I just had sex. Now I'm on a frozen tundra and there's a horse coming at me.
With snow, the snow people remind me of. Do you remember Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino? It was like the big statue behind them that start moving. Like that's what that looked like. That was actually pretty creepy. I liked it. That was good.
Speaking of pretty creepy, we got an email from Black Girl Couch.
When Black Girl Couch, you're one of my favorites. And so I'm super excited to read your email tonight. And she writes in, I'm enjoying having Ash on the pod this year. She's definitely elevated the conversation. No disrespect to King Bee, but especially in regards to the female characters, it's simply necessary to hear that perspective. I've always liked Laura because she was never attempting to be likable. Like in life, some people are just hot messes and they either melt into goop or find some growth beforehand. And I kind of appreciate that angle to a woman. Lord knows viewers accept these traits in more problematic male characters. Looking at you, William. Bilquis finally gets an arc and Shadow and actual characterization. Hands down, this is steps above last season. Regarding Orlando Jones, sometimes people have patterns and I find he had one. He also had a great deal of creative say in last season and it was a train wreck. His rhetoric, while very relevant, was also, in my humble opinion, becoming pulpit preachy. And as a Black woman in 2021, I kind of feel like more Black men should shut the fuck up and bow more to their goddess. He did adequately acknowledge the goddess was a weapon that was needed. However, as we see this season, she is a force all her own. Anyone else hoping for a Technical Boy Bilquis team up since they are both the least impressed with their master's agendas? Stay safe and awesome, Black Girl Couch.
I don't know if I want to see a Tech Boy Bilquis team up. I don't feel Tech Boy is worthy of Bilquis. What would be crazy if Bilquis is the other all along?
Yeah.
Like that could go with that. Like a Bilquis Shadow team up would be badass.
Well, I love the idea, right, that she's come into her own and then she finds herself as the other. And just the fact that they're called the other, I think, I don't want to get too much into my nerdiness here, I know. But like the idea of the language of the other and othering, right? Like I think it's very intentional that they're calling them that. And so her feeling so othered her whole life, that actually you may be onto something there.
Now, Black Girl Couch, I also agree with you on the Laura Moon thing because I had to check myself a lot of times. So when I didn't like her character, I was like, do I not like her character because it's a shitty character? Or do I not like her character because I just don't like the person Laura because she's just in a very offensive, inappropriate, despicable sort of woman, right? And would I accept those character traits in a man? And I think honestly that this season they've really nailed the character where she does not put up with shit. She goes to the afterlife and she is completely unapologetic. She is herself. They haven't really neutered the character in any way, but what they have done is made her more realistic because most people I know who are obstinate or difficult or feisty, there is a heart and a soul to that person. Now, this might have been intentional too, in the fact that she is a dead person, without a soul, essentially, for much of the first two seasons. So they've changed the character somewhat. But I do agree with you that if they completely changed her into this like loving, really likable, cheery character, it wouldn't work for me. I would have felt it was a betrayal. I don't want what we had in season one, but I certainly don't want something that drastically different.
Well, and I think that we needed something to relate to, whether it's a man or a woman, you need something to relate to in the character. And I don't know about you, but like, I don't believe in purgatory, but if it existed, I would have been that much of an asshole in purgatory. I would have been like, what the fuck are you making me watch? Like, why the fuck are you making me watch this? I would have been completely impatient that like she is everything. And I think that that was so likable, the relatability of the way that she dealt with the banality of purgatory and almost the offensiveness of people trying to tell you about your own life. I thought that was really, really fun this season. And I think that's what sold me on her. Is finally I get something. I see myself in some way in her that they didn't give us in previous seasons.
That's fascinating because I'm such a guilty person, just naturally. I'm just consumed by guilt all the time that if you put me in purgatory, I'd be like, I know. Ah, man, I'm really fucking sorry. I would watch the movie of my life just as penance for everything that I'd done.
See, that's why you would have been an orange card and gotten called up way before me.
Yeah, real or imagined, I'm always to blame.
Yeah, not me.
Ash, let's get to the 10-foot werewolf in the room. No Marilyn Manson this episode.
I know. I still feel very complicated about this, but whether you agree or not, you got your first non-Marilyn Manson episode. And I am curious how things would have changed if he'd been able to be in the episode. But I'll be very honest, looking at what happens, I really don't think we're missing much. Whether you wanted him in it or not, I don't think you're missing a whole lot of not having him there. I thought the skin suit was kind of lame, but I did think they did a good job with his face. Like it did look like Marilyn Manson in that skin suit, which was good. But I don't think he would have like been some revolutionary thing. And I bet you the producers were kind of like, fuck, we should have just done this all along. Like we could have just had, some random dude and then do a CGI werewolf.
On Shappy Hour, we've been having a lot of these really petty debates. And I think that this is one debate that I would love to have, which is if somebody does something completely reprehensible in their normal life and they're on an episode of TV, but their role in the episode of TV is to be dead guy with his chest cavity exploded, do you really need to cut them out of the episode if they're not actually doing anything other than being dead?
Right. Probably not.
I did like that when Odin went to visit Dunker. Dunker is the guy that was like the butcher guy that liked to eat goats and children. And Dunker does the riddle because he likes to do the riddles. I thought that was really funny. Odin goes all the way upstairs into this empty room that looks like Marilyn Manson circa Sweet Dreams would be living in it. He's not there. He comes down, Mr. Wednesday, and says, you could have mentioned he wasn't here. It made my day. If this was something that was shot after or edited specifically to address the fact that Marilyn Manson is not in the episode, well done.
Well, and it's so funny that you bring that up because I said to the person I was watching this out loud, like, holy shit, like they could have shot the cover of Smells Like Children in this room because that's like even color palette was like down to a T, exactly what the cover of that album looks like. I like it when you can get shady in a clever way, and I'm all for that kind of shade. But the Lakeview plot is not moving as quickly maybe as the rest of the show. But one thing they are continuing are these little nuggets about Anne-Marie. And what I liked this week is Shadow clearly notices that Anne-Marie is a shady lady, right? Like he clearly recognizes that something's going on there. And so I think we should put a little pin in that because I think that that's going to develop over the next 3 episodes.
You can tell that she's drifting to something very, very dark. And I love seeing it develop just little by little. Also, in this episode, we got Payoff with Salim. So Salim hasn't been doing a whole lot this season, other than watching 1-800-FAP commercials in the hotel room while people bang away next door. But here we got to see some diversity represented at the table there. Salim giving us a little bit of education on Oman, but also showing what he does. And what he does is verbal contracts, and he does them pretty damn well.
Yeah, I thought he did okay. I mean, I do think Laura's stupid. I think she made a dumb deal, right? Like, I mean, I think she's letting her vengeance drive her rather than logic. And you can see his frustration with her. The fact that she's clearly not good at the business makings. And that's pretty clear this episode. But I do like that they were both so true to their character there. And I think that there's something to this duo. I think he's got obviously a bigger role to play by maybe finally being that voice of reason. Because we didn't get that with Sweeney, right? Like they were both hotheads. And like Salim is very calm and he's collected and he's logical. And that's an interesting dynamic to put with Laura this season.
Also, what an ominous deal they made.
I know.
Laura, if you fail, all your friends die, okay? Okay.
You did.
Like, didn't she just learn from being dead that that's not a good thing?
That's what I'm telling you. If you're in purgatory and you're having to watch this terribly boring movie of your life, like, is the next thing you want to do go back there? Of course not. I would be running as far away as I could from Mr. Wednesday and just living my life.
Me too. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV American Gods. We hope you enjoyed and will join us next week for more. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com, or you can email us like Black Girl Couch did at hosts at shatontv.com, or call us with a voicemail at 914-719-SHAT. Also catch us live on Twitch at shatontv.com/Twitch, where we do our Shappy Hour cocktail party Friday nights at 9 Eastern. And check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we join our good friend Big D, Dick Ebert, to cover 80s and 90s movies commissioned by you, the listeners. You can find past and future episodes at shatthemovies.com. We are coming up on our 200th.
Woohoo!
It'll be my science project, and it is terrible.
It's so bad.
Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. The movie's terrible, not our podcast. Our episode is great.
Our episode's really fantastic, but everybody don't watch the movie, just listen to the episode.
It is free on YouTube, though.
But just listen to the episode.
It's what all the kids are watching now. Mr. Wednesday on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Ash Schlafly, and Big D, Dick Ebert, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for Season 3, Episode 8, The Rapture of Burning.
What a great title.